Alright, this game was as even as it gets, and I don't think the Thunder changed anything at all, because they were still trying to play with a lot of pace. They were catching the Nugs in transition a lot, especially in the first half, so every time the Nugs defense wasn't set, it was a runout or quick bucket, because they kept getting behind or beating them off the dribble too easily, and they just feasted in the paint throughout. But more importantly, that was really how they were able to combat the Nugs 2-3 zone in the half court, because that was their main change, and I thought it was effective for a couple reasons. First, it was taking away the Thunder's two-man game with Zay, and second, it made it easier to load up on Shai, so between that and Yoke's shows off screens when they were in man, he just kept getting forced off the rock. At least he was making the right pass more times than not, but the Thunder weren't getting much out of it, so if it weren't for them capitalizing in transition, they probably wouldn't have had much offense, and that's what allowed them to keep up with the Nugs on the other end, because they were all aggressive from the start. It was obvious the point of emphasis was to match the Thunder's physicality after Game 2, because it showed from top to bottom, especially from Maul, and he was the one that set the tone. He was always looking to push the rock in transition, and was always looking for his shot in that two-man game with Yoke, so every time he came off a screen, he was either pulling quick, getting downhill, getting to a spot, or forcing the switch to fry the big. But the screens were just another point of emphasis, because that was the best way to free him up from the Thunder's physicality, so there were a lot more screens and even more of their patented screening actions, and a couple flares early was all MPJ needed to go on a heater. From that point onward, he just made tough shots, but it wasn't just him, because their entire team was shot ready, so all of them were pulling with no hesitation or just looking to make a play, and it was even showing with that second unit. Surprisingly, they got a lot of production in those non-Yoke minutes, and they needed all they could get, because Yoke had one of the worst games I've ever seen from him. I wouldn't even say it was just from the Thunder's defense, because he missed a lot of his usual looks from deep, committed a lot of careless turnovers, and even when he got to play ones in the post, he was smoking his floats or hooks. He was really just taking what the defense gave him, and if anything, it was smarter than Nugs to stop the frequent post dumps, because they haven't gotten anything out of the doubles or triples he's been seeing, so by playing him primarily as the hub up top, that was unlocking the screening actions they needed to create more of a flow, and that was what allowed them to establish the rhythm they had throughout. If it weren't for that rhythm, they probably wouldn't have made the big shots down the wire playing out of their two-man game, but it wasn't just about that end of the floor, because they were just as good on the other, and that just stemmed from them going to man more in the second half. I don't think the Thunder were good against their zone, but they were even worse against their man, because they were staying in front of bodies on the first line, especially Brown, so the Thunder weren't getting as many open lanes or pockets to exploit the paint, and even when it did break down, there was help on the second line to take away those same easy finishes at the rim. Between that and them consistently walling off Shai up top, the Thunder struggled to score, because Shai was either having to get off the rock on shallow paint touches, or settling for a tough step back from deep whenever he hunted Maul for some reason, and if it weren't for Dub at least frying on his ones, it probably wouldn't have even went to OT. But that didn't matter, because it was no different from the fourth, and this is now the second time they've lost a game of buckets against a team that's starting to show their championship DNA again. Just watch the tape.